Hello and welcome. I'm your host today, Kathy Hayes, here at CAN TV for Your Vote, Your Voice 2022. We are continuing our conversation with Judge Dominique Ross, who is running for the Appellate Court, punch number 152. We're going to continue our conversation with her to get a bit more insight on what this campaign means and what it means to you. So stay tuned in. Thank you so much for staying with us and continuing your conversation with us.
Thank you.
It is so wonderful to sit down and talk with scholar women such as yourself that have been so giving in public service for so many years. You've been an attorney or practicing law in the law field for many years now. Almost what?
This is 27 years in the legal profession, yes.
Wow. And you've been on the bench for how long?
For almost 14 years.
Wonderful. And you're still going forward. Where do you get that energy, for one? And what made you think that this was even achievable? There's so many women in law that are trying to step forward and lean in and do great things and be great public servants. What was your calling like?
You know, when I graduated from law school, on the day of graduation, my mother handed me a letter that I had written to her when I was in high school, and I wrote it to her when I was away for the summer. And the last line that was in that letter said, "Mom, I'm going to surprise you one day, and I'm going to be an attorney." And when she handed me that letter, it was so funny, and we all just kind of laughed and were beaming with pride and joy because that day actually came to be. And I actually did not remember having written her that letter, but like all moms, she saved every letter that I wrote to her, and she gave me that one. And I told her to keep it because I wanted her to be able to present it to me at some other point in my life too.
Well, hopefully she will be able to give it to you again when you are sworn in as Appellate Court Justice.
That's right.
What an amazing, because that would have just I would have just been rolling and crying on the floor. What an amazing foresight. But your children, what does this mean to them? You
know, when I started law school, I had a 3-year-old
oh my God.
And a 6-month-old. When I left law school, I had a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old. Wow. And I tell them to this day that they were never the excuse why I could not do something. They were always the reason why I did. And I had a supportive husband and a supportive family, and they were all rooting for me. And I was able to achieve my goal. And I tell people, especially young women who are thinking that they aren't able to do things or there are obstacles, you have to, just like we break down barriers, we have to break down obstacles. If you can't go around it, then go over it or go under it. And if you have to, knock it down. So that's what you have to do in order to achieve your goals.
You say, and every little inch helps. I love it.
Yes.
The fact that you were able to just stay true, because legacy is everything, and I'm sure you've given them a phenomenal legacy to follow behind. That's amazing. In dealing with, because, you know, being a judge, that robe is such a, not only is it an honor, but it is such a necessity to, when you sit and you are personally involved with people's lives on that level, how do you educate those that come before you? Because many times, I have to be honest with you, I only knew one lawyer when I was growing up as a kid, you know? So I never understood the business of law and the business of court. So how do you relate or talk with or educate the community on how to better present themselves in the business of law?
Well, when people come before me, the one thing that you have to do is treat people with dignity and respect. And you have to realize that they don't go to court every day. I'm in court every day. And I have been in court pretty much every day. I actually counted it up. It's like 317 days per year if you take away the weekends and vacations and that type of thing. So I understand, but people who come in front of me don't understand. And they're coming in front of me for family law issues. And sometimes they have been misinformed by television or from people who think they know and they don't know. So the first thing that I do is listen. I listen to them to get the facts of their case. And as I tell them, I don't know your family. One size doesn't fit all. Yes, I know the law. There is a law that I have to follow, but there is also discretion that I have. And what that means is to make a decision that fits their family dynamic. And that is what I try to do. And I have had people to tell me often that I listen to them and they appreciate it. And it might not go exactly as they thought it would. They might not even be happy. But I tell people, I said, this is a time in your life. I said, and it will pass. So you want to make decisions or have decisions made, enter into agreements that will stand the test of time long after this portion of your life has passed. And you know, children are affected, and we have to look at what is in the best interest of children, what is in the best interest of families, and what is fair and what is equitable. And people are like, well, the judge didn't like me, or that judge. It's like, no, judges don't have a stake. And people have to understand that the decision is based on the circumstance along with the law.
And that's the type of insight you would be able to bring to the appellate court, correct?
Absolutely, because you have to review the entire record. Hopefully, when a case comes to the appellate court, they've had a court reporter. And the court reporter will then transcribe what took place on the circuit court level. And you look at that record along with the written briefs and evidence that was presented, or perhaps evidence that should have been presented. And the court takes a look at that, and although you are not hearing the people speak necessarily, because if there's an oral argument, usually the attorney is going to do it, but every now and again you have a self-represented litigant who comes in to argue before the appellate court, and you're listening, not a new case, but review of the record. And you have to have a certain understanding of what took place, what was the environment, what were the circumstances, and then the application of the law.
Wow. And you have to be in agreement with another justice.
That's correct.
That happens.
Yes, there has to be 2 of the 3 who sit on the panel that makes the decision of whether to affirm or reverse and remand.
So many times when you go to the different law schools and you try to educate them and speak with students, 7-Elevens, the third-year law students who are trying to find their way, who want to be dynamic lawyers one day, what are some of the sage advice that you give them?
Not to give up. That is the main thing.
That's the main thing, right?
And to listen. When there is a 7-Eleven student, I always encourage them after the case is over and tell them that they've done a good job and to keep it up. And I often participate in, there's this one particular program called Women Everywhere. And Women Everywhere has young girls, usually high school students, who come and observe the courtroom. And once the courtroom is clear, or if I do have a large group of people in the courtroom, I will take them back into chambers and I will allow them to ask me whatever questions they want to ask, and just to encourage them. And not only that, I ask them questions because it's important for me to know what they're thinking, what's on their mind, because they are the future leaders. They are the future judges, mayors, governors. They are the future. And if they can remember that one day in time and I made a difference, then that makes all the difference to me.
Now, you've also made an impression on some other organizations that you work with regarding incarcerated mothers.
Yes, that was early on in my career, and it was more of a format. It was called Legal Assistance to Incarcerated Mothers. I think CLAIM was the acronym.
The acronym?
Yes, and so it was basically women who were incarcerated and they had children, and it was how to deal with their children while they were incarcerated, and what was going to happen once they left the system.
The system, wow. Are your parents, you spoke of your parents in our previous conversation, and how encouraging and supportive they've always been, and your family as well. Are they also lawyers, or?
No, actually, my father is a retired college professor. He was an educator. And my mother is a retired civil service worker. She worked for the Chicago Park District for decades. That's where she retired from. And, but of course, neither one of them stayed retired. They each had something else that they were doing. And I have a bonus mom, my stepmother, and she was also an educator and is a retired superintendent for several school districts within Illinois.
Well, amazing.
Yes.
So education was a strong theme for you growing up and going on.
Yes.
So I am not surprised at all that you became an attorney,
Right.
Which is a very important thing for the rest of us. As a community, as a culture.
And
how do you think we're going to go forward? How do we get more young people to get involved with the positive sides of law and public service and things like that?
Well, for me, it starts at home. I have 3 adult children, and all 3 of my children are working and productive citizens. My oldest is a Spanish teacher. I always say that she is my inner flower child because she spent 2 years in a Spanish-speaking country with the Peace Corps. And she is fluent in Spanish, and she teaches at one of the Chicago schools. My son is a Chicago police officer. He went away to school, but he decided that he wanted to come back and protect and serve. And so he also offers a different experience because he's from the community, and he works within the community.
Wow.
And so, and my youngest, he went corporate. And so he is a business consultant, and he's doing quite well. And I'm proud of all 3 of them because I told them, get your education and do what you love. And that is the crux of life, is you do what you love. And people think about the money because the kids will ask me all the time, well, how much do you make?
They actually ask you that.
I say, Google it.
But public service is your payment as well, I know.
Yes,
and
yes.
it seems that is what they've also turned over to your children.
Absolutely.
The issue of service.
Yes.
It seems to be multi-generational. That is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to come right back after this short break. Make sure that you tune in so you can learn more about elections coming up this season.
I'm Judge Dominique C. Ross. Like the U.S. Supreme Court, we need qualified judges on the Illinois Appellate Court. Judges with different life experiences. I will bring my common sense approach to the Illinois Appellate Court.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all. If I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Hi, and welcome back. Thank you. We are continuing our conversation with Judge Dominique Ross, and we will be talking more about how to give back to a community that has given so richly to her. Thank you so much for taking this extra time with us. We really appreciate it. There's so much about the appellate court people just do not know, and that it exists, and how important it is to the day-to-day liberties that we share in a community. But we need to know more about our systems so that we can better have access to those particular systems. The appellate court, the first district that you're in, and the hall vacancy that you are trying to be elected to, how many African Americans are on the appellate court? I mean, the court system here in Illinois is almost 200 years old, and it doesn't seem that we have much diversity in the court system.
Well, we do need to continue to move forward as far as diversity is concerned. Right now, we have 24 justices on the appellate court in the first district. Of those 24, there are 3 elected African American females and only 1 elected African American male. So we do still have work to do, and we want to maintain that diversity, because with diversity we bring the experiences not only of our life but our culture and our environment, along with the legal knowledge that is required to sit on the appellate court.
Absolutely. And during this time where we have so many challenges in the city, out of the city, I just want to make sure that people are clear what the appellate court does. You guys listen to trial cases from the Cook County Court.
Well, what the appellate court does is the circuit court actually hears the trial. And if the outcome is such that either the plaintiff or the defendant or the petitioner or the respondent does not agree with the decision of the circuit court judge, they have the right to file what's called an appeal. And so all appeals go to the appellate court, which is the second level. And of the 3 justices who sit on a panel, they have 1 alternate. And of those 3 justices, 2 have to come to a consensus as to whether to affirm the circuit court decision or to remand it back for further hearing or to outright reverse. So it's very important that people not lose hope that this is just it. There is a second set of eyes that are going to review the record. So it's not going to be a case where it's heard all over again.
That is a wonderful leaf of hope for those who are looking for equity or justice or just to be heard in the community. That is very, very important. And because you guys are so committed to the community, I'm sure that your insight will be greatly appreciated in those areas. I know that a lot of the cases that you are now in front of or come before you deal with family law.
Yes.
And I know it can be very heartbreaking sometimes, some of the issues that come before you. How do you handle or decode from some of that after a long, trying time? Because even though you are reviewing very astutely the process in the law, I'm sure some of those cases are very touching to your heart as well. How do you adjust to handling some of that heavy responsibility?
Well, I allow the parties to be heard. And oftentimes, that is the issue. People want to feel like they're being heard. And if they are not being heard, either because they are unable to convey that information to their attorney, who then conveys it to the judge, there are times, and this is always, you know, I tell people, you have an attorney. Did you ask your attorney if you want to say that? And if their attorney is fine and they want to speak to me outright and we're in the courtroom proceeding, I will allow them to say what they have to say. And I think what's really important is that you have to explain to people why certain things are happening.
I agree.
And while I can't give them a crash course in the law, I can tell them what the particular statute is that applies to their particular set of circumstances and why a decision is going to be made. And especially when you talk about what's heartbreaking is when children get caught up in a situation. And I have to tell people what you're doing today is possibly going to affect your children and how they view life and relationships long after this situation has calmed itself. So you want to take that into consideration. And the wonderful thing about Cook County is that we have a myriad of services. We have mediation services, we have home study services, intervention services. We have guardians ad litem who come in and they're third parties who will then talk to the children, or child representatives who then talk to the children. And they are the eyes and ears of the court when parties are sometimes so enmeshed in their own situation that they somehow lose sight of what might be the best interest. I think that at the heart of it, everybody has the best interests of their children, but we're all human. There's a human aspect to everything, and sometimes you need that third party to step in and be the eyes and ears of the court, and then the judge is able to make the decision. And I find that people are reasonable for the most part. People are reasonable, and if you can explain to them why certain things are happening, then they might not like it, but they can live with it and they can adhere to it. And I would proudly say that most of the cases that come through my courtroom settle. And that is a very important aspect of this particular division because this is your life.
Yes.
And you're going to have to abide by that decision. So the court can make certain recommendations prior to going to trial. It's called a pretrial, and both parties present their side of the case, and as if it were going to go to trial, but without all of the formality. And then the court can make a recommendation. And at that point, people are told, this is not the end. You are able to still put forth your trial if that's what you choose to do so. And sometimes people do still go on with the trial, but many times people actually settle. And I find that more people are reasonable than not.
And that's damage to everybody all around.
Yes.
Which is very important, that everybody can walk away from the courtroom still whole or
that
still
that is
together.
Correct. And they might be upset for a little while. But I'll tell that I've had people who come back and get remarried. So, oh yeah. So
well, that was a surprise. I wasn't expecting to hear that. They come back.
They will come back, and they've been back. They might be going through a second time, but yeah, they come back.
All right. There's always hope out there.
There's
hope is a big thing, especially these days with COVID and everything else. I know that the courts have been very challenged with the issues for the past 2 years under COVID. How has that worked with domestic relations?
Well, it was a challenge, but I will say that under Chief Judge Evans and my presiding judge is Grace Dickler, that the court system kept moving. Because even at the height of the shutdown, it was just a shock to everybody who would have ever thought that we would live through something like that. We still had 2 judges who would go in on an emergency basis and hear cases, because life does not stop even when we have these situations. And so eventually, within the next couple of months, when it was apparent that this was an indefinite situation, there was Zoom. And
Technology.
yes, technology. And court ran via Zoom. And it was a learning curve for everyone to learn how to work Zoom. I had never heard of Zoom. But I was a quick study and learned how to operate Zoom, and slowly but surely cases were heard. And what's ironic about the whole thing is we were going to start remote proceedings, but it was going to be on a trial basis.
Oh, wow.
And there were 2 judges that were pegged to do the remote proceedings for statuses and routine motions, so that people did not have to come all the way down to the Daly Center to get a new court date.
Right.
And so we all found ourselves thrust into Zoom.
Deep.
Yes, deep. And I will say Zoom is here to stay. So while we are slowly moving back into the courtroom, Zoom for statuses and for routine matters will probably continue to move forward, and your more contested issues, at least in my courtroom, will come into the courtroom. But people have to understand that things are not going to move as fast
As they want them to.
as they want them to, because we are remote and because it does take extra steps and extra time. Yeah.
So we're going to, I don't want you to get away without saying to our wonderful audience who have been kind enough to share their time with us, your punch number and your contact information. That is the most important, because the election dates are coming up upon us very quickly.
Yes.
So please feel free.
Yes. I'm Judge Dominique C. Ross. You can punch 152, and my website is Ross for Justice, and that's the number 4, Ross for Justice. Dominique C. Ross for the Illinois Appellate Court, punch 152.
That's right. Ross for Justice and Ross for You. Please make sure that you use your voice to be vote with your vote. It's important. It's important for all of us, the entire community. Voting is a very important part of our democracy, and we are depending on everyone to show up and use their voice with their vote. Thank you for being a part of our conversation today, and make sure you stay tuned for more information.